The small town of Maplewood was known for two things: its sleepy charm and Joe's Diner. Nestled along the edge of Main Street, the diner had been a staple in the community for decades. Its neon sign flickered softly against the clear blue sky, casting a warm glow over cracked pavement outside. On this particular afternoon, the place wasn't busy. Just a few locals scattered around the room, sipping coffee or finishing late lunches. Emily Turner moved between tables like clockwork, balancing plates and refilling cups with practiced ease. Her fiery red hair stood out even more under the diner's fluorescent lights, tied back into a messy ponytail that matched her no-nonsense attitude. She'd worked at Joe's for almost 3 years now, long enough to know every creaky floorboard and every regular customer by name. Today, though, something felt different. In the corner booth near the window sat an older man she didn't recognize. He looked out of place among the usual crowd. His weathered face bore deep lines etched by time, and his eyes carried a quiet sadness. What caught Emily's attention most, however, was his outfit, a black leather vest covered in patches. It marked him as part of a biker club, though nothing about him seemed threatening. In fact, he looked almost fragile, hunched over his untouched burger and staring absently out the window. Emily approached cautiously, offering a polite smile. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. The man glanced up, startled before shaking his head. "No, thank you," he replied, his voice gravelly but kind. "This is plenty." She nodded and stepped away, making a mental note to check on him again later. Something about him tugged at her curiosity, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, like someone who'd seen too much of life and didn't have much fight left in him. Just as Emily turned toward the counter, the bell above the door jingled loudly. A group of teenagers burst inside, their laughter echoing off the walls. There were 4 of them, 3 boys and 1 girl, all dressed in oversized hoodies and ripped jeans. They swaggered toward the booths, their energy overwhelming the otherwise peaceful atmosphere. At first, Emily thought nothing of it. Teenagers came in all the time, usually harmless despite their loud antics. But then she noticed them heading straight for the corner booth where the older man sat. One of the boys leaned down, resting his hands on the table as he smirked at the man. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Nice jacket. Where'd you steal it from?" The man stiffened but said nothing, keeping his gaze fixed on his plate. Another boy chimed in, snickering. "Yeah, what's with all these dumb patches? You some kind of soldier or something?" Their words hung heavy in the air, sharp and cutting. Emily froze mid-step, gripping the tray in her hands tightly. She could feel the tension rising, the other customers glancing nervously between the group and the older man. No one spoke up, not even the cook peeking through the pass-through window. Then, without warning, one of the boys reached out and knocked over the man's coffee cup. The dark liquid spilled across the table, pooling onto the floor. The sound of it hitting the tiles rang out like a gunshot, breaking the silence. "That'll teach you to mess with us," the boy sneered, stepping back with a satisfied grin. Something snapped inside Emily. Without thinking, she marched over to the booth, planting herself firmly between the teenagers and the older man. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her voice came out steady and strong. "Leave him alone," she said, glaring at the group. "He didn't do anything to you." The teenagers blinked in surprise, clearly not expecting anyone to challenge them. The leader, the one who'd knocked over the coffee, narrowed his eyes at her. "What's it to you, huh? Just doing my job, lady." "This isn't your job," Emily shot back, crossing her arms. "You're just being jerks. Now apologize and get out of here." For a moment, nobody moved. The tension crackled like electricity, filling the diner with an uncomfortable heaviness. Then slowly the teenagers began to back off, muttering under their breath as they shuffled toward the door. As they left, one of them called out, "Whatever, freak. Hope you don't lose your job over this." Once the door slammed shut behind them, the diner fell silent once more. Emily let out a shaky breath, realizing only then how tightly she'd been holding herself together. Turning to the older man, she offered a small, apologetic smile. I'm sorry about that, she said softly. Are you okay? The man nodded, looking both relieved and grateful. Thank you, he murmured, his voice barely audible. I appreciate what you did. No problem, Emily replied, waving off his gratitude. They shouldn't have treated you like that. As she cleaned up the spilled coffee, the man introduced himself. Frank Mitchell, he said, extending a hand. And you are? Emily. Turner? She answered, shaking his hand briefly. Just doing my job, I guess. Frank chuckled faintly, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. Not many people would have done what you did today. Most folks just looked the other way. Emily shrugged, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't thought twice about stepping in. It was instinctual, really. Still, there was something about Frank that made her want to stick around a little longer, to make sure he was truly all right. Little did she know, her simple act of kindness would soon spiral into something far bigger than she could have ever imagined. For now, though, all she cared about was making sure Frank felt safe, and proving that not everyone in the world had forgotten how to stand up for what was right. By evening, the diner had grown quieter. Most of the lunchtime crowd had left, leaving only a few stragglers nursing cups of coffee or finishing their meals. Emily worked silently, clearing tables and wiping down counters. Despite the calm atmosphere, her mind kept replaying the earlier confrontation with the teenagers. She hadn't expected it to escalate so quickly, but deep down, she knew she'd done the right thing. Protecting Frank felt like second nature, even if it meant standing up to people who thought they could push others around. As she stacked plates behind the counter, Mr. Harris, the diner's manager, approached her. He was a wiry man in his 50s, with thinning gray hair and a perpetually worried expression. Normally mild-mannered, he now looked unusually tense, clutching a piece of paper in his hand. Emily, he began, his voice low but firm. Can we talk for a moment? She nodded, setting the plates aside and following him to the corner near the register. His face was unreadable, but there was an edge to his tone that made her stomach tighten. I got some calls today, he said, avoiding eye contact. From the parents of those kids you handled earlier. Emily frowned. Handled? I just told them to leave Frank alone. They were being rude and disrespectful. Mr. Harris sighed, rubbing his temples. I understand that, Emily. But these folks are saying you were unprofessional. They're threatening to complain to corporate if we don't do something about it. Her heart sank. This wasn't the first time someone had complained about her, but it was always over small things, like forgetting to refill a drink or mixing up an order. Never something like this. So what does that mean? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. You're going to fire me because I stood up for a customer? It's not personal, Mr. Harris replied, finally meeting her gaze. But you know how it is. We can't afford bad press, especially with all the new chain restaurants popping up around here. If word gets out that one of our employees caused trouble. He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Emily clenched her fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. How could anyone think standing up for someone was causing trouble? Wasn't that what decent human beings were supposed to do? You're really firing me for this? She asked, her voice rising slightly. For doing the right thing? Mr. Harris winced, clearly uncomfortable. It's not just about today. There have been other complaints too. Look, Emily, I like having you here. You're a hard worker. But sometimes you let your emotions get the better of you. Maybe take some time to cool off, okay? The finality in his words hit her like a punch to the gut. She wanted to argue, to scream that she didn't deserve this, that no one deserved to lose their job for protecting someone from bullies. But she knew it wouldn't change anything. Instead, she forced herself to nod stiffly, biting back tears. Fine, she muttered, pulling off her apron and tossing it onto the counter. If that's how you feel, then I'll go. Without waiting for a response, she grabbed her bag from the break room and walked out the door. The cool night air hit her face, but it did little to ease the heaviness in her chest. She slumped onto the curb, staring blankly at the empty parking lot. For the first time in years, she didn't know what to do next. Unbeknownst to Emily, Frank Mitchell hadn't gone far after leaving the diner. He'd returned to his motorcycle parked just outside the glowing neon sign and waited. When he saw her step out, shoulders hunched and head bowed, his suspicions were confirmed. Something had gone wrong and he intended to find out what. Approaching cautiously, he cleared his throat to announce his presence. "Emily?" She looked up, startled before recognizing him. "Oh, hey Frank. What are you still doing here?" Frank smiled faintly, though his eyes remained serious. "I wanted to make sure you were all right. You seemed pretty shaken up earlier." Emily shrugged, brushing a strand of red hair out of her face. "Yeah, well, turns out standing up for people doesn't pay the bills. I got fired." Frank's expression darkened. "Fired? For helping me?" "Apparently defending customers isn't considered professional," she said bitterly. "Guess I should have just ignored those jerks and gone back to work." Frank shook his head, his jaw tightening. "That's not right. You didn't do anything wrong." "Well, try telling that to my boss," Emily muttered, kicking at a pebble on the ground. "Anyway, it's fine. I'll figure something out." They sat in silence for a moment, the distant hum of traffic filling the space between them. Finally, Frank reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. Handing it to her, he said, "Here, take this." Emily glanced at the card. It had an address written on it along with the words Iron Riders Clubhouse. "What's this?" she asked, looking up at him. "It's where I ride," Frank explained. "We're a tight-knit group and we look out for each other and for people like you, folks who stand up when it matters. If you ever need help or just someone to talk, so you come find us, all right?" Emily hesitated, unsure of what to say. She didn't know much about biker clubs, but Frank's sincerity was undeniable. "Thanks," she said finally, tucking the card into her pocket. "I appreciate it." Frank nodded, patting her shoulder gently. "Take care of yourself, Emily. And don't let anyone tell you that doing the right thing is a mistake." With that, he climbed onto his motorcycle and roared off into the night, leaving Emily sitting on the curb with a mix of emotions swirling inside her. Gratitude, frustration, confusion, they all battled for dominance as she stared at the card in her hand. Little did she know, the Iron Riders weren't just any ordinary biker club. Word of her dismissal and her act of courage was already spreading among their ranks. By morning, the quiet town of Maplewood would become the center of attention in ways no one could have predicted. For now, though, Emily simply sat there, watching the stars twinkle above. Life had thrown her a curveball, but she refused to let it break her. After all, standing up for what was right might have cost her a job, but it had also earned her something far more valuable: respect, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to start anew. The next morning, Emily woke up feeling like she'd been hit by a truck. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the events of the previous day over and over again in her mind. Getting fired wasn't something she'd ever imagined happening to her, not for doing what she thought was right anyway. But here she was, jobless and unsure of what to do next. Her younger brother, Jake, found her still lying in bed when he came home from school. At 15, Jake had always looked up to his big sister. He plopped down on the edge of her mattress, frowning when he noticed the sadness in her eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked, nudging her arm playfully. "You look like someone stole your favorite dessert." Emily sighed, sitting up slowly. "I got fired from the diner yesterday," she admitted, her voice flat, "for defending that old guy, the biker from some Bullies." Jake's expression shifted from playful to serious. "Wait, seriously? They fired you because you stood up for someone?" "Yeah," Emily replied, running a hand through her messy red hair. "Apparently it's unprofessional to tell rude teenagers to leave customers alone." "That's ridiculous," Jake exclaimed, throwing his hands up. "You did the right thing. Why would they punish you for being brave?" Emily shrugged, unable to answer. It didn't make sense to her either, but there wasn't much she could do about it now. Still, talking to Jake helped lift some of the weight off her chest. His unwavering support reminded her that not everyone saw her actions as a mistake. After their conversation, Emily decided to take a walk to clear her head. As she strolled through the quiet streets of Maplewood, she couldn't help but notice how different everything felt without the routine of going to work every day. The diner had been such a big part of her life for so long. It was strange to think she might never step foot inside again. When she returned home later that afternoon, she found Jake sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone. He looked up as she walked in, excitement lighting up his face. "Hey, Em, check this out," he said, holding up his phone for her to see. On the screen was a post from a local news website titled, "Waitress Fired After Defending Elder Biker from Bullies." Below the headline was a picture of Emily standing between Frank and the teenagers, looking fierce and determined. Comments poured in from people all over town, and even beyond, praising her bravery and calling for justice. "This blew up overnight," Jake explained. "Everyone's talking about it." Emily stared at the screen, stunned. She hadn't expected anyone outside the diner to care about what happened. Yet here were hundreds of strangers supporting her, sharing her story and demanding accountability from Joe's diner. But that wasn't all. Scrolling further, Jake showed her posts from various biker groups online. One comment caught her eye. 500 riders confirmed. "Let's show them what happens when you mess with one of us." "What does that mean?" Emily asked, confusion written all over her face. "It means the bikers are coming," Jake said, grinning. "They're planning to ride into town tomorrow to support you." Emily's heart raced. She remembered the card Frank had given her the night before, the one with the address of the Iron Riders Clubhouse. Had he been behind this? Was this really happening? Meanwhile, at the Iron Riders Clubhouse, preparations were underway. Bikers from all over the state had gathered, filling the large meeting hall to capacity. Frank stood at the front of the room, holding a megaphone as he addressed the crowd. "Listen up, everyone," he called out, his voice strong and commanding. "We're here today because of a young woman named Emily Turner. She lost her job because she had the courage to stand up for one of our own. That kind of bravery deserves recognition and protection." The room erupted in cheers, fists punching the air in solidarity. Frank waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "Tomorrow we ride into Maplewood together, not to cause trouble but to send a message that bullying and injustice won't be tolerated, and if anyone tries to silence those who speak out, they'll have to deal with all of us." The bikers roared in agreement, their voices echoing off the walls. Plans were made, routes mapped out, and logistics discussed. By the time the meeting ended, everyone knew exactly what needed to be done. As the crowd dispersed, Frank pulled aside a few key members of the club. "Make sure word gets out to other chapters," he instructed. "The more riders we bring, the stronger our statement will be." By the end of the day, social media platforms were buzzing with updates about the planned rally. Photos of motorcycles lined up in formation flooded feeds, accompanied by captions promising support for Emily. Local businesses began offering discounts to bikers who participated, while residents of Maplewood prepared for what promised to be the biggest event the town had seen in years. Back at home, Emily scrolled through the endless stream of messages, comments, and shares online. Her initial shock gave way to gratitude and a little bit of fear. What would happen when 500 bikers rolled into her small town? Would it change anything, or would it just make things worse? Despite her doubts, one thing was certain: she wasn't alone anymore. Strangers from all walks of life had rallied around her, united by a shared belief in standing up for what was right. For the first time since losing her job, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this experience would lead to something better, something bigger than she'd ever imagined. As night fell, she tucked herself into bed, clutching the card Frank had given her. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but she was ready to face them head-on. With an entire community of bikers, and countless others, standing beside her, she knew she could handle whatever came next. By noon the following day, Maplewood was buzzing with excitement and a little bit of nervous energy. Cars lined the streets as residents poured out of their homes to witness what promised to be the biggest event the town had ever seen. Word had spread quickly about the arrival of hundreds of bikers, all riding in to support Emily Turner. The first rumble of engines could be heard from miles away, growing louder as the convoy approached. One by one, motorcycles rolled into town, their riders clad in leather vests adorned with patches representing different clubs from across the state. Some wore bandanas, others sported sunglasses that reflected the bright sunlight. Despite their tough exteriors, there was a sense of camaraderie among them, a shared mission to stand up for someone who'd done the right thing. Frank Mitchell led the procession, his weathered face set in determination as he guided the group toward Joe's Diner. Behind him stretched a sea of bikes, each one adding to the thunderous roar that echoed through the streets. By the time they reached their destination, nearly 500 motorcycles were parked along the curb, creating a breathtaking sight that drew gasps from onlookers. Inside the diner, Mr. Harris paced nervously behind the counter. He'd spent the morning fielding calls from concerned customers and local authorities, all warning him about the impending rally. His hands trembled as he peeked through the window at the massive gathering outside. Never in his life had he imagined something like this, happening because of a single employee dispute. "What do we do?" he muttered to himself, wringing his hands. "This is going to ruin us." His assistant manager tried to reassure him, but even she looked uneasy. The diner was unusually quiet, with only a handful of brave patrons lingering inside. Most had decided it was safer to watch the spectacle from afar. Outside, Frank stepped forward, holding a megaphone to address the crowd. His voice carried over the hum of idling engines and murmurs of anticipation. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, his tone firm but respectful. "We're here not to cause trouble, but to show solidarity with someone who stood up when no one else would. Emily Turner lost her job because she defended one of our own. That's not justice, it's wrong." The bikers cheered loudly, pumping their fists in agreement. Curious townsfolk gathered around, snapping photos and whispering among themselves. Many were surprised to see such a peaceful demonstration from a group often stereotyped as rowdy or dangerous. Nearby, Emily stood with her brother Jake, watching the scene unfold in awe. She hadn't expected anything like this, certainly not the overwhelming support from complete strangers. Her heart swelled with gratitude as she scanned the faces of the bikers, each one nodding or smiling warmly in her direction. "You okay?" Jake asked, nudging her gently. Emily nodded, though tears welled up in her eyes. I can't believe this is real," she whispered. "All these people came here, for me." "It's because you did something amazing," Jake replied, squeezing her shoulder. "They respect that." As Frank continued speaking, he turned his attention to the diner itself. "Mr. Harris," he called out, his voice amplified by the megaphone. "We don't want to hurt your business, but we also won't stay silent while good people get treated unfairly. If you value your reputation, you'll make things right." Inside, Mr. Harris froze, his face pale. He knew he couldn't ignore the situation any longer. Grabbing his phone, he dialed Emily's number, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. When Emily answered, his voice cracked with desperation. "Emily, please come back to the diner. We need to talk." She hesitated, unsure of whether she should trust him after everything that had happened, but something in his tone suggested he truly meant it this time. Taking a deep breath, she agreed to meet him. Accompanied by Jake and a few members of the Iron Riders, Emily made her way to the diner. The moment she stepped inside, all eyes turned to her. Mr. Harris stood behind the counter, visibly sweating as he fumbled for words. "Emily," he started, his voice trembling. I made a mistake. Firing you was wrong. You were standing up for a customer, and I should have supported you instead of letting fear dictate my decision." Emily crossed her arms, studying him carefully. "So what happens now?" she asked, her tone calm but firm. "I want you to come back to work," Mr. Harris replied quickly. "Your job is waiting for you, if you'll take it." For a moment, silence filled the room. Emily glanced at Jake, then at the bikers standing beside her. They nodded encouragingly, leaving the final decision in her hands. But deep down, Emily already knew her answer. Returning to the diner felt wrong, not because of Mr. Harris, but because of what the place represented now. It wasn't just a job anymore. It was a reminder of how easily principles could be compromised for profit. "No thanks," she said finally, her voice steady. "I appreciate the offer, but I think it's best if I move on." Mr. Harris looked devastated, but he didn't argue. Instead, he nodded slowly, understanding that some wounds ran too deep to heal overnight. Outside, the bikers erupted into cheers when Emily emerged from the diner, her head held high. Frank greeted her with a proud smile, patting her on the back. "You did good, kid," he said warmly. "Real good." Emily smiled back, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in days. For the first time in a long while, she realized she wasn't alone. She had allies, people who believed in her and valued courage above all else. As the bikers prepared to leave, many stopped to shake Emily's hand or offer words of encouragement. Some even handed her envelopes containing donations to help her get back on her feet. By the time the last motorcycle roared away, Emily was surrounded by love and support from every direction. Though the day had been overwhelming, it left her with a renewed sense of purpose. Life might throw challenges her way, but she now knew she had the strength and the community to face them head-on. Whatever came next, Emily Turner was ready. In the days that followed the rally, life in Maplewood began to return to normal, or as close to normal as it could get after such an extraordinary event. The story of Emily Turner and the 500 bikers had spread far beyond the small town, making headlines across the state. Local news stations covered the incident extensively, interviewing residents, bikers, and even Emily herself. Social media buzzed with praise for her bravery, turning her into an unlikely hero. For Emily, the attention was overwhelming but also humbling. She hadn't expected her simple act of kindness to spark such a massive movement. Strangers reached out to her daily, offering words of encouragement, job opportunities, and even financial support. Donations poured in from people who admired her courage, helping ease the stress of suddenly losing her income. One morning, while sipping coffee at home, Emily received a call from a local business owner named Clara Bennett. Clara owned a small, family-run cafe called Morning Brew, known for its cozy atmosphere and homemade pastries. She'd heard about Emily's situation and wanted to offer her a fresh start. "Emily," Clara said warmly over the phone, "I'd love for you to come, work with us. We pride ourselves on treating our employees like family, and we could really use someone with your spirit here." Touched by the offer, Emily accepted without hesitation. It felt like the universe was giving her a second chance, not just at a job, but at finding a place where she truly belonged. Her first day at Morning Brew was nothing short of magical. The cafe had a charm that Joe's Diner never did, with soft lighting, wooden tables, and shelves lined with books and plants. Customers greeted each other by name, creating a sense of community that Emily immediately fell in love with. Clara introduced her to the staff, all of whom welcomed her with open arms. As the weeks went by, Emily settled into her new role effortlessly. Serving coffee and chatting with customers became more than just a job, it was a joy. People often stopped by just to thank her for standing up to bullies or to share how her story had inspired them to do the same in their own lives. Some even brought gifts, baked goods, handmade cards, and flowers. To honor Emily's journey, Clara decided to hang a framed copy of the newspaper article about her on the cafe wall. Beneath it, she added a plaque that read, "Courage inspires change." Every time Emily looked at it, she felt a swell of pride, not because she sought recognition, but because her actions had reminded others of the power of doing what's right. Meanwhile, the diner struggled to recover from the fallout. Word of Mr. Harris's decision to fire Emily had tarnished its reputation, driving away many loyal customers. Online reviews painted the establishment as unsupportive and unfair, and fewer people were willing to give it a chance. Though Mr. Harris tried to make amends by posting public apologies and offering discounts, the damage was done. By the end of the month, Joe's Diner announced it would be closing its doors permanently. Though Emily felt a pang of sadness for the loss of a longtime local staple, she couldn't help but see it as a lesson. Businesses thrived not just on profits, but on values, on treating employees and customers with respect and fairness. Morning Brew embodied those principles, and it showed in every interaction she had there. The Iron Riders remained a constant presence in Emily's life. Frank visited the cafe regularly, always bringing laughter and stories from the road. He invited her to speak at the club's annual charity event, where members raised money for causes ranging from veterans support to children's hospitals. Standing before a crowd of hundreds, Emily shared her story, not to boast, but to remind everyone of the importance of standing up for one another. "You don't have to be fearless to make a difference," she told the audience, her voice steady and heartfelt. "You just have to care enough to try. Sometimes, doing the right thing comes with risks, but trust me, it's worth it." Her speech earned a standing ovation, solidifying her bond with the biker community. They weren't just supporters anymore, they were family. And though Emily still marveled at how quickly her life had changed, she embraced every moment of it. At home, Jake teased her relentlessly about being famous. "Next thing you know, Hollywood will make a movie about you," he joked one evening as they sat on the couch watching TV. Emily laughed, rolling her eyes. "Yeah, right. Who'd want to watch a movie about a waitress?" "Are you kidding?" Jake replied, grinning. "It'd be epic. Bikers, bullies, drama. It's got everything." Despite his teasing, Emily knew he was proud of her. His unwavering support had been a lifeline during the toughest moments, and she was grateful to have him by her side. Months later, as autumn leaves turned the streets of Maplewood golden, Emily reflected on how much her life had transformed. Losing her job at the diner had been devastating at first, but it had led her to something far better. She'd found a new career, a supportive community, and a renewed sense of purpose. Most importantly, she discovered the strength within herself to keep fighting for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. One crisp morning, as she served coffee to a table of regulars, a young boy approached her shyly. He held out a drawing he'd made, a picture of Emily standing tall between a group of bullies and an elderly man. "This is you," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "My mom says you're a hero." Emily knelt down to his level, smiling softly. "Thank you," she said, accepting the drawing. "But I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who stood up when it mattered. And you can do that too, anytime you see someone in need." The boy nodded earnestly before running back to his parents. Watching him go, Emily felt a warmth in her chest. Her story had touched so many lives, inspiring others to find their own courage. That, more than anything, was the legacy she hoped to leave behind. As she pinned the drawing to the cafe bulletin board, alongside photos and notes from grateful customers, Emily realized something profound. Change didn't happen overnight, and it rarely came without sacrifice. But when people came together, with kindness, bravery, and determination, they could create ripples that spread far beyond what any one person could achieve alone. And for Emily Turner, that was enough.